washed by the blood. My little battery's on red, Chad, so it may go out. 1986. In 1986, there was a gentleman, there was a guy, young man at that time, who lived in Nashville, Tennessee. He was 26 years old. He was already a multi-millionaire. He was making money at a fast rate. He was making money, we might say, hand over fist, and he was doing it legal. It was a legal means that he was doing it. As a matter of fact, this guy was a Christian. He was taking high debt in financing. He was taking high debt pieces and financing it with property, with real estate, and he was doing well at that. But in 1986, Congress passed a tax reform act, the Tax Reform Act of 1986, and it caused the real estate market to take a hit. It took a nosedive. So he has all of this high debt financed through real estate, through the value of real estate before 1986, and after that passes, that property value plummets, and he's left with this debt that he cannot pay. The banks begin to call him and say, you have 90 days to pay off this debt. And it was a large sum that he owed as well, and he could not sell his real estate because the value of it, he could not sell it for what he needed to get out of it because the value of it had dropped so significantly because of everything that had taken place. So this man is left to file for bankruptcy. And he prays to God. He says, God, I don't know why this happened. Why did you allow this to happen to me? He says, I wanted to serve you, God, through this, but none of this makes sense. Why is this trial? Why am I going through this trial in my life? What he did during that time of struggle and trial in his life, he took the Word of God. He began to read the Word. He began to apply it to himself. He began to study the Word. And this 26-year-old man, in the midst of this great trial in his life, he came up with these biblical principles for finance. That's what he was looking at. God, I want to know why I'm in this trial. God, you used me during this trial. God, let's apply these biblical principles that I've dug up, that you've shown to me on financing here. He does that. He begins to share it with some of his friends. His friends read through this. They look through this. They go over his notes, and they apply it to their lives, and they say, man, this is good stuff. You need to share this with others. You need to share this with the church. So he goes to his church. He shares it with the leadership at his church. And today, Dave Ramsey has a Bible study that benefits people around the world. So at the age of 26, he goes through a significant trial in his life of bankruptcy, and he wonders, God, why did this happen to me? But quite possibly, if you want to know what Dave Ramsey has to say, you can look up his books. He has books published. He has Financial Peace University that you can take many places, even in this area right here, for about a 9-week course. You can do it through your house, do it online. A leader person will call you, check up on you, and make sure that you're following it, that you're going through it well, and that if you have any questions, they'll answer that for you. He used to even be on Fox News, Fox Business maybe, and take questions through there, and he has a radio program as well. But at 26 years old, Dave Ramsey is bankrupt. God uses that trial in his life to do what? To bless millions around the world today. And if you're familiar with his radio show, people get on there and they let out a big yell because they are debt-free. God did that through the trial in his life. James chapter 1. That's what God can do in our trials. His trial was to help people. It benefited people to get a grip on their financial situation. And James is going to come in here and he's going to talk about trials in our life as well. James begins his epistle talking about this. Mine says, testing your faith. trials in your faith, trials in your daily walk, trials in your just every day that you go through life, you have a trial. Maybe you've just come through one. I just prayed that. Maybe you are in the middle of one right now. Maybe your trial is that spouse that's sitting next to you and y'all just had an argument this morning when you pulled in the parking lot. Maybe you had a disagreement over what kind of butter to put on the popcorn last night as you was watching a Hallmark movie together, right? Amen. But we've all had trials. Either we're in a trial now or a trial is waiting for you. It's inevitable. They're going to come. They'll be there. But James is speaking here to the Jewish Christians, and he's telling them, you need to live out your Christian faith. It's time to live out your Christian faith. We can have trials in parenting, trials in marriage, trials at work, trials at school, trials with our grades, relationships, neighbors, property lines. We can have trials, just struggles in any area of our life. But James says they're coming. He says you come to the lecture. James says you come to the class. That's what you're in right now. You're in the lecture, you're in the class, but the trial is out there in the real world. That's the lab part of it. You come to class, you come to the lecture, but then you have to go out into the lab, into the real world, and you have to live it out. You have to live out the Christian walk, the Christian faith. So that's the first thing. The first thing that James says, he says, live it out in your life, and he says, trials are inevitable, they are certain. It is a certainty that you will have trials in your life, and you will have more before you pass away too. They're coming. They will come. So verse 2, Peter even talked about that as well. Peter said that trials are a certainty also. So don't be shocked when they come at you. Verse 2, consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials. This is the same word that Peter uses when he gets to trials and various, but James says here, he says when. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials. That's what the Word says. That's what James says. That's what the half-brother of Jesus says. He says, when they come, consider it all joy when trials of various kinds, when you encounter trials of various kinds, when they come your way. He didn't say if. He didn't say consider it joy if that day arises in your life, or by happen chance, or just supposedly a trial comes up in your life. James says when they come. Consider it all joy, brethren, when these trials come. And he says they're various, these various trials. They are multicolored. They are, some trials will be harder than others. Some trials will carry more of a testing than other trials will. There'll be different degrees of this testing, various kinds. Poikilos is the Greek word for that. Polka dotted, various stages, various sizes and intensities of these trials will come your way. And that's what he says. He says various trials. A trial can be external. An external trial could be a sick child. An external trial could be a flat tire in the morning, a dead battery in the morning when you get up to go to work. A trial could be your phone system goes out and it haunts you all weekend. Amy is the only one that realizes that. That's a trial for her. That's a trial for her. She says it's a curse. But anyway, those are trials. Those are external trials in our lives. There can be internal trials as well. So there can be external trials. They're going to come at you. External trials are going to find their way into your life, into your house. External trials will be there. Internal trials will be there as well. What's an internal? An internal trial is dealing with sin in your life. Internal trial is trying to get rid of that sin, move past that sin, relying on God to deliver you from that sin in your life. So they're coming. These trials are coming. There'll be various trials that come along as well. And their timing, they're unpredictable. The timing of the trial The type of the trial is unpredictable, but it is certain that they will come. You know what? A trial is not going to call you when you walk out of here, or when you walk in your house this afternoon after church. The trial is not going to pick up the phone and call you and say, guess what? Tomorrow, noon, you need to be ready. There's a trial coming. Put your boots on, buckle up, because it's headed your way. This is what the trial is going to be. Trials don't do that, do they? You do not get a heads up of what the trial is that's coming your way. They just come, and when a trial comes, their timing is good, isn't it? It's always a good time when the trial comes. Their timing is horrible, right? It's a horrible time when trials come, when struggles come. And it says trials as well. It doesn't say just one. It's not singular. It's plural here. So it's plural. So we know it's not going to be just one struggle. Some of you are going to be in a trial for the rest of your life, maybe because of a health condition or a health situation. You wake up and you face it every day. You're just trying to make the best of the aches and pains that you have right now. You're just trying to manage and get through that. So yours is going to be an ongoing. There's going to be probably no really lessening of that trial in your life. Now, it would be great. It would be great if, there was just one trial. If it was just singular. If you were married and you had one trial for 50 years in your marriage, and after that one trial, that was it. That would be great, right? But that's not the way it is. That's not the way that the Scripture says. That's not what James is saying. They're various and they're multiple that happen. Trials can be financial. They can be through school. They can be work-related. And you have one trial, and then you have another one that follows it, and then you have more that follow it. And it's like boom, boom. They just come right after the other. These trials do. He says, consider it all joy. Now, that's hard to do. Consider it all joy. He's nuts. He's crazy. Consider it all joy that I'm going to have this when I encounter these trials. Consider it all joy when I struggle with this. Now, what James is not saying is he's not saying when your boss gives you a pink slip that you call your spouse on the phone and you both hysterically laugh about it. That's not what James is saying at all. 2 Corinthians, you don't have to turn there, I'll just read it to you, but 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 4 says this, I'm filled with comfort, I'm overflowing with joy in all our affliction. Paul says this, he says, Paul who had been beaten, Paul who had been shipwrecked, he had been in jail, he had been accused of things, he had been stoned, he had been left for dead. He says it's your attitude. He says, consider it all joy. How is your attitude? How will your attitude reflect what's going on in your life? When you're a Christian, do you have the same attitude in victory that you have in defeat? Are you the same person in defeat? Are you the same person in the trial that you are when things are sunny, when things are going good? Paul says we need to have this settled disposition about our life. That's what James is saying as well. Consider it all joy. Well, there needs to be this settled disposition in our life that this is how I'm going to react. I'm going to have this disposition of a Christ-like attitude no matter if I'm a victor or no matter if I'm being beat down by the world. Have it settled in your mind. Have it settled in your attitude, in your action, the way you're going to respond. That's what that consider it all joy means. I have decided in my mind that I will respond this way. I will have a Christ-like character no matter what comes. We'll talk about that more later. Verse 3. Knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. Now this testing with fire, this is the metallurgist that takes the fire, heats the fire up, he puts the metal in there and he shapes it. He molds that metal. You're in this fire. You're in these various degrees degrees of fire, and sometimes the fire intensifies. But in the middle of that fire, in the middle of that testing, do you have the right attitude so that you can be pliable? When you're in that fire, when you have that in that position where you can be molded or formed or reshaped, do you have that attitude that you will allow God to reshape you, to move you, to mold you into the way that He wants you? So he says there's this testing in verse 3, and he says that produces endurance. This endurance means that you will remain under God. Mano is what it is. Hippomeno, I will remain under God. And he starts out verse 4 with the same thing. I will remain under God in His will, in what He's doing in my life. As I go through this trial, I will remain under God and allow Him to mold me, to shape me, to increase my faith. Verse 4, and let endurance have its perfect result. There's that endurance again. Since I'm under God, it's going to produce this result. I'll remain under God through this time. Through this time of testing, I'll remain under Him, it having its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So when these trials come, we remain under the wing of God, under His protection, under His coverage. You meet the trial, you submit to God what He is doing, what He can do, what He will do, how He will bring you through that trial. Story about Michelangelo, I probably shared it before. I know I've shared bits and pieces of it with you before, but he had that, you remember that slab of marble that he had out there, and he was going to carve this feature out of it, and he was out there chipping on it. And somebody comes up to Michelangelo and they said, how did you get, it's called the David statue there. He said, how did you get the David out of that block of marble? And Michelangelo said, he was already there. I just had to chip away what wasn't needed. That's what God needs to do. That's what God does in my life. That's what God needs to do in my life. Through a trial, God is going to bring out a chisel and a hammer, and He's going to chip away what's not needed. Why? So that it produces a more perfect faith in God for me. Now, who out here needs to have some chipping done on their life so that your faith can be strengthened and He can produce a more perfect you in His image? Right? If you're honest, you'll say, yes, that's me. Amen. That's bold. Verse 5. But if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. Now, this is a rhetorical. If anybody lacks wisdom, it's not if somebody happens to have all the wisdom, but it's what it's saying is, since you lack wisdom, in the midst of trials, seek God's wisdom for overcoming. We'll explain that. We'll explain that here in just a second. In the midst of the trial, say, this is from you, God. It's not that you're saying this is from you, God, and I thank you for it. That's not what it is. God, I'm in this struggle here, and I thank you for this struggle. I'm going to be greater because of it. That's not normally the way we think about this. Normally, when we get in a trial, how do we act? What's the first thing you do when you get in a trial? Me, I get mad. You get mad. You get in a trial, you get mad. That's probably the first reaction that we have. I get mad, maybe you get mad, you're in this trial and you think no one else, you think in your trial, you think nobody else has ever suffered like this before, right? You think you're the only one in creation who's ever gone through this. We do. We do. I've talked to a bunch of people, and that seems to be one of the first places their mind goes to. And I think about that for myself as well. I think about that in something that I may go through. I think, well, I'm the only one that's trapped by this or strangled by this or just chained down to this, and nobody else will understand. Nobody else can sympathize with me or help me out. We do. We get mad and we think, well, I'm the only one. I'm the only one that this affects or who's ever gone through something like this. So James has given us some instruction right here. Look at verse 6. So he said, if you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. He says it's better to go into the trial. James is saying it's better to go into that trial looking, how can I get wisdom from God on the other end of this trial? How can I grow on the opposite side of this trial? God, because you're in it, okay? You're going to be in this trial. You're in this circumstance. You're in this situation. And you're going to have to go through it. So God, how can I go through it, and how can I get the wisdom from you on the other side of this trial? Wisdom is not knowledge, though. There's a difference in wisdom and knowledge. Man has the knowledge to create a automobile that can go 150 miles an hour plus, but man does not have the wisdom to not drive it drunk. Okay? Knowledge and wisdom are different. Wisdom is the ability to apply Christ's character to the situation. That's the wisdom of the situation. How can I apply Christ's character to what I'm going through or this struggle that I'm in? That's what he's saying right here, in back there in verse 5. All right, verse 6. But he must ask in faith without any doubting. For the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. Verse 7 and 8. For the man ought not to expect that he will receive anything from the Lord, being a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. So let's look at this real quick. So you've seen things tossed around by the waves. You see, either we're on the lake or at a beach or something like that. You see something out there in the surf or in the whitecaps or in the movement of the water, and it just gets pitched around, tossed around. James says, he's saying, you come into church. How can we apply this for ourselves? You come into church, all right, you see things tossed around. They're just, they're not anchored by anything. They're just bounced around. The wind, the wave, the surf moves it around, just beats it to death. For us, James would be saying, you come into church and you're struggling. All right, you come into church, God, I'm being bounced around. I'm being beaten. All sides of me, my front and my back, it's all getting beat. I'm getting tossed around. I've got this struggle. So we're going to say it's a financial struggle. God, I come in here to church. I've got this financial struggle in my life. I need help in this financial situation of my life. God, I need you to bless my finances so that I can get out of this situation. But God, I'm not going to commit my finances to you. So you're just going to get beat around. You're just going to get tossed around. God, I want you to bless me. I want you to get me out of this situation. But God, I'm not going to give that area of my life to you. And there's not much wisdom in that, is there? It seems silly. But that's the way we live our life. We make a lot of promises to God when we're bent over and we're aching and we're in a bad situation. We make a lot of promises to God, but we do not give Him that area of our life. And where do we find ourselves again? Back in that bent over, aching situation. It's crazy. We say, well, that's crazy. That's crazy to think about something like that. Asking for a blessing of God, but not to give Him control of it, right? We say, well, that's just silly, but that's the way we are. God, I want you to get me out of this mess, but God, I don't have the faith. I'm not going to give it over to you when you do. So what's the priority in your life then? Wisdom would say you trust God with your salvation, with your eternity, right? Then you can trust God with today. Then you can trust God with what's on earth. Then you can trust God with what will fade away someday. He says, don't ask with this doubt. God, I need you to bless, but I'm not going to turn it over to you. That's the doubt. Don't ask with the doubt. That would be like teaching. You ever taught anybody to dive? Anybody to dive into the water or something? Or to jump in the water. Just a little kid to jump in the water. You know, some are bold. Some are bold. They just go running out there. They don't think about anything. They don't even care if the pool's filled up with water. They'll just jump in it anyway. Head first concrete, you know. Doesn't faze them, and they'll get up and laugh about it. But if you got a little skittish kid, you know, and you want to teach them to dive, what do? You start at the ladder, maybe at that bottom rung. Just bend your knees, bend over, put your hands down like this, tuck your head in, and just kind of fall in. And you kind of gradually begin to help them. You begin to walk up that ladder a little bit. You begin to get to the edge of the pool. And you begin to tell them you need to push off a little bit, have a little bounce in your legs, spring off of that, and then maybe you get to a diving board and you teach them to bounce off of that and to do that. They had to build this faith in you. But what do most kids do when you're teaching them to do that, especially if they're young or if they're just going to jump off? And what are you doing? You're out there in the water usually with your hands up, right, saying, I'll catch you. Just jump, I'll catch you. Just jump, just have faith, I'll catch you. Isn't that what the parent does? You just like me right here, like somebody going to catch me. Just jump, I'll catch you. But what do? We say, I can't jump. I can't trust you to catch me because my feet have got to be on something solid. I got to be on solid ground. I got to be on the edge of the pool deck. I got to be on the edge of the platform. I got to be on the edge of the diving board because I don't trust you, God, to catch me. I don't trust you, God, to manage it well. Because you've already done a bang-up job managing your own life, right? Your job is so good that God cannot improve from where you're at right now. That's what you're saying. That's what I'm saying. That's what I say. All right, verse 9. But the brother of humble circumstance is to glory in his high position. High position just means I'm in the fact that I'm in a trial. The fact that I'm in a trial, in a trial, God has His hands on you. I'm going to glory in the fact that I'm in a trial, that God has His hands on me, that I'm going to relinquish this control in my life, that He can do something in my life for me. You're going to glory in this high position that, God, I'm not going to rest on my resources. Tough, isn't it? God, I'm not going to rely on my resources, but I'm going to rest on your ability. I'm going to rest on your faithfulness. I'm going to praise you for what you are doing, what you will do, and what you have already done. Verse 10. And the rich man is to glory in his humiliation because like flowering grass, he will pass away. So, wealth's going to pass away. It's all going. What God is saying, what James is saying right here is it doesn't matter to God what ethnicity you are, what color you are, what race you are, what side of the track you were born on, what side of the town. You live on the north side, the south side, the west side, whatever side of the city that you live on, He does not matter. It is no thing to Him that all people go through trials and hurts, and He's accessible to all people. That's what He's saying. All people go through trials and hurts. Now here, this is the last story. This is Genesis chapter 36 and 37. You don't have to turn there. We're not going to read anything. You can read it on your own if you want to. But we tend to think that those who, we're talking about this rich man right here, we tend to think that those, and I do, we tend to think that those that have money, well, they don't have trials. Their trials are surely less than my trials. Because what can they do? They can just buy their way out. They can just write a check for it. They can just put a debit card on it. They can just take the money out of the bank and they can take care of their trial. So their trials are probably less than mine. Esau has 5 sons, 10 grandsons, 13 chiefs, 21 tribes are mentioned through his family. You can read that in chapter 36 of Genesis. Esau multiplies greatly. He's the one who sold his birthright, remember, but he multiplies greatly. His children become great, and they spread. His children, his family, they spread all over. And you would look at Esau and you would, if that's all you knew about him, you would say, well, he's successful. He's been successful in his life. And then if you get to chapter 37, you look at Jacob. Jacob, and you read about Jacob and what he has. Jacob basically has one piece of land. He has one piece of land, and it has a cave in there, and it has a tomb in there, and it's for his dad, his mom, and his granddad, and that's basically all that he has, a cemetery with a cave. That's what he has. He has these 12 boys, and he has a daughter. He owns really no land, and you would look at those two pictures right there of people, and you say, well, who was the more successful one? We'd say, well, Esau. Esau's the more successful one in this little story right here. Jacob, we know Jacob's life. Jacob has one trial after another. He goes off to Laban. He goes to Laban, and Laban, he falls in love with Rachel, and he sees Rachel, and he wants to marry Rachel, and what does Laban say? Laban says, you work 7 years. Jimmy, you want to teach this? We just did this in Sunday school. Laban says, you want to marry Rachel, then you need to work 7 years for her. Okay, he says, that's a trial. Then he got to work 7 years. 7 years there. He has nothing. He brings nothing to Laban. He has no money to buy his wife to pay for that. So he works 7 years for Laban, and then he goes in at the end of that 7 years. They have a big wedding, they have a big feast, they have a big celebration, and he goes in and he consummates the marriage ceremony there, and he wakes up the next morning after this big party, and what's he see? He's been tricked, right? He's been deceived. That's not who I wanted. That's not who I said I wanted to marry. Laban, you've tricked me. The deceiver has been deceived. The trickster has been tricked. That's what Jacob was, the trickster, the deceiver. He's got this trial, so he has to work another 7 years to get the wife that he wanted, to get Rachel. So in all, I think he works about 20 years with Laban. And as he constantly works with Laban, Laban constantly changes the rules on this guy. He's from one trial to another. Jacob flees Laban. He runs into his brother Esau, who he's fearful of. Why? Because he stole the birthright from him. So there's another trial. He spent all these trials for the last 20 years. Now he's fleeing. He runs into another trial, which he thinks would be his brother who would want to kill him. One night, he wrestles with an angel of the Lord. He goes through this trial of wrestling with the angel of the Lord. He wrestles so vigorously with him that he won't let the angel of the Lord release him until he blesses him. And what does he do? He touches him in his hip, in his hip there, and he walks with a permanent limp for the rest of his life. It's a trial. He ends up taking about 70 people of his family to Egypt. His life seems tragic. We would say, well, Esau fared much better. We would say Esau fared better than Jacob. Jacob ended up in Egypt. From Esau, the descendants of Esau were the Edomites. You know where the Edomites are today? There's not a single one of them left. There's no descendant of Esau left today. They're extinct. Been removed, gone. But out of Jacob. You know, Dave Ramsey had a trial, and because of that, he produced a Bible study about finances. Jacob had a trial. Out of Jacob's trial was the blessing of the line of the Messiah that came. Out of Jacob, you have the Messiah who comes. Out of Jacob, you have the promise of the land of Israel today. Out of Jacob, you have the promise of their nation multiplying by millions and millions. And they have had trial. That nation has had trial after trial after trial. Paul says Christians have been grafted in to this family. You have been grafted in to that family. All eternity will be populated by the family of the Jacobites. Grafted into it. But we would have thought Esau was the better. We would have looked on paper and said, well, statistics say that this one fared better. But it wasn't so. It was the one who suffered through the trial who fared better. So what about your trial today? Are you in a trial? Does it stink? Probably does. But will you allow the wisdom of God, will you allow a Christ-like character to be seen in your trial? I'm going to ask you to stand and bow your head. We would think that Esau won in the end, but he didn't. He didn't win. You think you're on the losing end of your trial. Hopefully you're not. Hopefully you have a different perspective. Hopefully you're willing to see or to look at it a different way and see how God can use it. God, I'm going to act in a Christ-like manner. I'm going to reflect that in my life. Maybe you have, like I said, done the bang-up job on your own, and you have really messed it up. And you say, God, I can't do anything else. I've put myself in a royal mess. God, will you deliver me from it? And when you ask that, you got to say, God, I'm going to relinquish that control. I'm going to give you control of that area of my life. I'm just going to move away from it. I'm going to let you manage that. You're a better manager. God, I have to take breaks. I have to sleep. I have to pause. I have to refresh. But God, you're always on the job. Whose hands would you rather it be in, yours or His? What's your need this morning? Is your need for salvation? Is your need for eternity? Is your need for just right here in the temporal, in the here and now? He'll take care of both. If your need is eternal, then you need to walk forward this morning. You need to come and say, I need Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior of my life. I need to put my eternity in His hands. Maybe you did that before when you were young. Maybe you did that in Bible school one year when you were, just grade school or before, and you've just wrestled with that security in your life. You can move forward this morning and just nail it down. Just be sure. Be sure and the devil will flee. Maybe you would like to just to come and pray for somebody else, intercede for another. Maybe this morning you'd like to come as we sing this last song. Maybe this morning you'd like to come and you'd like to join the church. You'd like to be a part of the fellowship here at this church. You say, this is a great time to do that. First Sunday of 2019, we just want to become partners here at Olive Baptist, and we want to just make that known with everybody and sharing that. We'd love to celebrate that with you too. So whatever your need is, as we sing this last song, I invite you, step forward, come out as we sing together. Amen.